Welcome gamers! So, you bought this wonderful looking game, read the rules, set it up and tried to figure out what to do, and you were totally lost in your first games. Well, I read lots of posts like this, and this is exactly what happened to me too. This game can be overwhelming. This can be a lot. In the first games, it took me, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 playthroughs, very slow playthroughs, to get a grab of just the basic things and how to do stuff. And yeah, so I thought, why not do a quick video about the basics, about the basic elements and how they interact and connect with each other. So this is not a tutorial video, not a rules tutorial. You should have read the rules, and this is also not a strategy guide, but maybe I can show you how things interact, what you have to look out for, so you're not that lost in your first games and start having fun with it sooner. Okay, let's have a closer look at the board. This part. This should be your major focus for the moment. Of course, the board itself is also important, but really this is where you have to keep your eyes on. We removed APs, MPs, not important at the moment. Ferocity, not important at the moment. These are the 4 major things to look at. One is military, so your military strength. The enemy morale, let's place it like this. Your culture, and also on the board the VPs, the territory you occupy with your family, and the sum of VPs. I'll talk about that a bit later. Let's talk about morale and military. There are 5 cards in your deck which are victory point check cards, and you'll have to make a victory point check. One of the major things, I'm not talking about all the details, but the major things is that you will subtract the enemy morale from your military strength. In this case, military would drop to 0, and after that morale drops to 0 anyway. Okay? So if your military is at 7 and enemy morale at 5, military would drop by 5 to 2, and then morale would drop to 0. But if military is below morale, so we have to subtract 6 from 4, so you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and for the 2 militaries missing, you have to reduce culture by 2. For each military you cannot reduce, so it would be -4, 1, 2, 3, 4 culture. If ever during the game military and culture reaches 0, you lost. So what do we learn? Try to keep your military at least equal or better above morale. This is really, have a look after each round, military should be above morale. Otherwise, when you have a victory point check and it's below, it can be the end of the game, especially if your culture is low too. So let's say we have it like this. Subtract 6 from military, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. We have to subtract 2 more. For the 2 we have to reduce culture by 2 each, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, lost the game. Also, the end scoring, the evaluation of your game is usually the difference between military and morale. So this is kind of a 3-point victory if you end the game like this. So try to keep your military above morale. Next is the victory points of the different territories. When you draw one of these victory point check cards, there's a number on it. It says 8 in this case. So you have to count the victory points of all territories occupied by a family. which is in this case for Shiprock 4 victory points, for Zuni Mountains 3, for Hopi Island 2, Hopi Land 2, and Lake Mesa 1, which is 7, 10. Okay? And if this is above the number here, your military will be increased by 1. If it is lower, military is decreased by the difference. And we said we have 10, but there are also victory point checks with 14. So we need 14 victory points. Now we have a difference of 4. So military, 1, 2, 3, 4, goes down by 4. This is merciless. And next would be the part where you subtract morale from military. Okay, so 1 minus 5, I show you what happens then. So always keep in mind that these cards, these victory point check cards, show up. And there are no secret. You can see them when you're setting up the deck. So you know which ones to expect and the numbers. I think in the basic, in the first, it's 8, 10, 12, 14, something like this. And when you expect them to show up, better make sure you have your families in the right territories to match or better exceed the victory points mentioned on the card. Number 4 is culture. Why? That's pretty easy because it's very hard to raise military. To increase military, there are only a few options and they are hard to achieve. But there's an option in the planning phase with elder action where you can trade culture one by one with military. So decrease culture by 1, increase military by 1. But only if culture is more or equal. So if culture would be like this, you cannot decrease it to increase military. It should be equal or more. So if you keep your culture above military during your planning action, you could use the elder actions to go like this. Okay? Increase military to get military above morale. The best looking track would be enemy morale lowest, then military, and then culture. Because military has to be above morale, of course, and culture above military means I can do elder actions and increase military by decreasing culture. When it's the player's turn, you have to decide between 3 major actions or ways of acting. One is the take action step, the next is planning, and the third is passage of time. These are the major decisions at the start of your turn. Will I do actions or planning or passage of time? Let's start with take actions. Actually, taking actions looks like a major part because it's all about the board and moving chits around. But I had games, it took a while to figure out that it is not necessarily the major part. Sometimes it's more about planning or taking a passage of time action at the right time. So what can you do when taking actions? I will not go through the whole list, but through the important parts why you should take actions. First is to fight outposts. Outposts are bad. Why are they bad? Because during the victory point check, they increase enemy morale by 1 per outpost. Also, there are enemy actions like the expand or subvert actions which reduce your culture if you have too many outposts in play. So you want to get rid of the outposts. So this is one of the actions you're gonna take to move into the outpost space and fight them. Another thing you will do pretty often, hopefully, is a raid. There are different modes to raid Santa Fe. Why do you want to raid? Because it gives you resources. This is a part where you pull out these cubes from the bag, and I don't want to show the blue one because it's a bad one. And depending on the color of the cube, you get new children in the Passage of Time box, or you get sheep and horses. And these are all very important. Horses to move faster on the board and increase your strength. Sheep to feed your families, and so on and so on. Next is moving around your families. Why do you want to do that? First, because you want to move into space to attack the outposts, or simply because you want to have the families in the right place for the victory point check. So if a family moved from here into the canyon, you want to move it back. So when the victory point check comes, you want to have your family one counter in each of the highest values victory point area. And these are the main actions. Another action is to plant corn, which are these counters, and to harvest corn, which just gives you another food, in this case 2, for the next passage of time where you have to feed your guys. Some other reasons to perform actions or movement is to move up a track, to remove drought counters. These are bad because they reduce the fertility of a territory. When you have to feed your guys, you want to have the least drought as possible, and removing drought is only possible in the upper areas. I will not go into detail, but this is important too. And another reason to move around is to have a look at these intruders. They will pop up every now and then, and yeah, you just sometimes want to move on them to remove them and have a look what happens. Sometimes they're good, like trade goods, or bad, like the skinwalker or other stuff. The second option when it's your turn is to do a planning action. So what is the major point of planning action? First, it is one of the 2 main ways to get population counter into the Passage of Time box. One is with ceremony cards. I will not cover these now in this video. And the other is when you do a planning action, you have a look at the card. In this case, it shows an elder and you add an elder. You want to increase your families. You want to increase the number of elders. There might be some family members lost. You want to fill up these holes here, these gaps. So this happens in the Passage of Time action, but you need counters in this slot, and this is one of the 2 ways to get the counters here with the planning action. The second, and for me the most important, is this is the part where you can convert culture points into military. This is what I showed you. These are the elder actions. So you roll for the elders, and for each elder that performs an action, you can reduce the culture by 1 to increase military by 1 if culture is above military. What else? You can reduce family's ferocity. Each time you do a raid, family ferocity is increased by 1, and each time ferocity is increased by 1, the evade value is reduced by 1. At least in my playing style, evading is more important than having a high ferocity value. Also, ferocity adds to the number of raid counters when the enemy raids you. So this is a way to reduce the ferocity of your families. These are also elder actions you can perform in planning. Then you can increase your APs. You'll get APs for your elders, and you can increase them as an elder action. APs are important for special actions, for preempting, so taking your turn before the enemy takes his turn, and to perform reactions against enemy raids. So you always want to have some APs, and this is the way to get it. This is another reason to plan. So these are the main things that happens during planning. The downside of planning is that your elders will move along this track here once per planning action. This is aging, and the higher they move, the more likely are they to die in the passage of time action. We will talk about that now. Option number 3 when it's your turn is to do a passage of time action. Passage of time serves to place the counters from the passage of time box either to your family or even create a new family or to the elders. So create new elders. And as mentioned before, they will die and maybe some families will die, or maybe you just want to increase your population and add more families. To have more families in your territories when it comes to the victory point check, because remember, you need to have families in the territories to get the victory points in the victory point check. But take care with this one. What you need when you do a passage of time is enough food to feed all the population counters. This can be sheep, this can be corn counters, and each territory gives you food dependent on if there is a family and how many drought counters there are. So with no drought counter, that would be 3 food, and with 2 it would only be 1 food. So make sure you have enough food to feed your guys. Next, of course, you should have some counters in the passage of time box, because without them there's nothing to move to the elders or to the families. Then, when you added the counters, let's say we did it like this, you count all the newly placed elders and subtract the number of open spaces in your family. And this is the culture increase you get. So the culture increases by the number of newly placed elders minus the number of open spaces in the families. So it's really useless if you have like lost 4 counters here and only place 1 elder and 1 child, because this would be +1, 0, -1, -2, -3, -4 culture. And this is another effect of the passage of time action. It's another way to increase your culture. And then one important thing which you should not forget, and it takes a bit of time to just keep this in mind, is during a passage of time action, if you have less than 3 red cubes in the subjugation box and a certain card is out of the game, which is only in the game at the beginning of the first scenario as far as I know, enemy morale drops down by 1. And this is one of the few options to drop enemy morale down, and this can only be done in the passage of time when there are less than 3 red cubes. It just automatically decreases by 1. I won a lot of games just seeing the enemy morale is at 3 and there are less than 3 red cubes, and I just did passage of time, passage of time, passage of time, and tried to bring it down, down, down until it's at 0, and you win the game immediately when enemy morale is at 0. Okay, you have to do a die roll dependent on the number of outposts in play. Okay, that was a basic overview over the main parts and what to look out for. Just a few words on some other things. The ceremony cards. The ceremony cards are another way to get counters into the passage of time box. In this case, if you take the ceremony card, you take a child counter and place it in the passage of time. Sounds pretty easy, and it is kind of, but ceremony cards are dangerous because when a second ceremony card shows up, the effect of all ceremony cards you have is triggered, so better get rid of them as soon as possible. A few words on outposts. Outposts are your enemy. You don't want to have them because in the victory point check they reduce your morale, and in the expand and subvert actions of the enemy they will reduce your culture. So better get rid of them pretty soon. But the positive side is each time you fight an outpost, your culture increases. That's a good way to increase your culture. Another point I wanted to talk about very quickly, because this is a story in itself and could take another full video, is the enemy raids. Okay, enemy raids will happen every now and then, and this is where these counters, these enemy raid counters, move along the track and will fight enemies that don't manage to evade, and then they will split and try to catch the next family, something like this. So I'm just mentioning this here. It is an important concept of the game, but just too much for this video at the moment. But this is another way enemy morale increases or decreases. So if the raid ends with no family caught, so no family in the caught box, enemy morale decreases, which is awesome. But on the other hand, if families were caught, enemy morale increases by the number of families caught. That's it for now. I hope I could give you a quick overview of the different main elements. There is a lot more detail which I didn't want to cover because this is something you'll figure out later. It was just about the main elements and where to look at, where to watch out, what the different player actions are about. And hopefully it helps you for your next game. Until then, have fun with Navajo Wars.